We all like to think we're rational when it comes to our finances, but the truth is, most of our money decisions are driven by emotion, family history, and psychology. So, does that mean we're trapped by our brains, forced to make illogical decisions from now until the end of eternity? Not necessarily, no. Behavioural finance can help us understand our own behaviours. It's the study of how our emotions and cognitive biases can affect our money decisions and why we sometimes act against our own best interests. So how do we stop self-sabotaging with money, and how do we build better financial habits that actually stick? That's today on Money and a Good Life. Hello everyone, welcome back. My name's Stephanie Coombs and I'm here with Tribeca's money expert, my mate Ryan Watson. How you going?
Hi Steph, how are you?
I'm good. This is something that you're going to love.
Well, I feel like I need to put this on record
Okay.
now. With full respect for every other guest we've had on Money and a Good Life in the past, today might be my first fanboy moment, but let's just see how we go with this.
Okay.
Let's just see how we go.
Wow, we didn't get to talk about that before.
There you go.
Let's bring him in. We're joined today by Evan Lucas. He's a behavioural finance specialist, a well-known media commentator, author of Mind Over Money, and host of the podcast Exchanges with Evan Lucas. Evan, welcome to the show.
Hi, can we get to that? Hi, how are you doing?
Yeah.
Why?
I've watched what you've done for a long time, and I love how you make the complex simple and the simple compelling.
Did you read my website?
The way, sorry Steph, not to go too much off track,
please.
but the way you engage with people, I love it.
But
It's
that's
common
my love.
sense.
Right,
Yeah.
that's why 'cause
Yeah.
my love is to sit here and do this,
Yeah.
right, and talk about, because in the end, and we're going to go through all of the behavioural stuff and all that material in a minute, don't forget the number one behaviour of all human beings is to interact with each other.
Yeah.
All right, so it's about having the autonomy. And if you can't communicate with each other, whether it's in finance and money, which we're going to talk about, or everyday life or in your business or whatever it happens to be, the number one thing about increasing your life enjoyment, your wealth, your business, what have you, is actually person-to-person sale. That's what it is.
Yeah.
I mean, person-to-person interaction,
Yeah.
you are selling yourself.
Well, and we're built for connection, right?
Yeah.
That's the whole, we're all built for connection. In a day and age where maybe we're diverting away from it,
Yeah.
that's the part I love.
Correct. And AI and all that stuff.
We can swear on this podcast.
Yeah.
By the way, so if you like.
Right, yeah. I'll try not to. The reason AI is all fascinating, what you just sort of alluded to, Ryan, with regards to where it sits, is that what is actually being found is that AI is actually creating a scenario where it's actually increasing the need to talk to each other more, because it's creating more confusion, or it's creating more work, which is a good thing, but the productivity that needs to come with that. Because I'm an economist by trade. I've worked in financial markets for 20 plus years. In the end, it still comes down to that what I refer to as not rational interaction, because no such thing as rational in human behavior. It's called reasonable, and it's our trade-off, and how we're trading off between what I need, what I want, and the autonomy that I have. Because autonomy is the number one thing, right? The feeling that your life choices are self-endorsed and self-chosen.
Yeah.
That's all I study. That's all economics is just studying what we are choosing to do in our everyday lives.
Well, why do people struggle to talk about money then, do you think?
Okay, so this is scarcity, right? So talking about money is about talking about I have versus I have not. And that immediately feeds into scarcity. So the biggest issue with the way that we work is that, again, looking at not just the psychology of it, but also the physiology of it, we're exactly the same as we were 35,000 years ago. I mean, I remember sitting in my physical anthropology lessons, and basically my lecturer came out with a skull that he'd cut in half and said, this is from 35,000 years ago. Now, it wasn't. It was a replica, because he couldn't have a 35,000-year-old skull because it's worth an absolute fortune. But he showed that the volume in there is the same. So we are geared to think about, I need shelter, I need food, I need to basically survive. They're the three main things. And therefore, we are geared to today. We are geared to making sure that we survive today. It's almost that simple. I mean, that's really simplistic. But in that response, the reason you go there is that it also means that if I lose my food, I die. That is the very anthropological answer. But the answer about money is that is the new world food. As in, I have X amount of money. If I was to lose that amount of money, I would therefore find myself struggling to survive. Shock answer, cost of living. Right now, if you ever wanted a better way of talking about that, the cost of living is basically seeing that my capital is struggling to keep up with surviving, shelter, everyday life.
And then putting on top of that, Evan, we're sold to, marketed to all the time, the haves, the wants, the needs, which taps into the way we brain. So it's almost scarcity just grows and grows. So we might have the bottom of Maslow's, the security and the shelter, but then it's you need this, you want this, and that's just being plugged into us.
Yeah, and look, a bit of the irony of what we're doing right now is a podcast where it's going to be actually coming straight into your face going, how you going? Think about doing this. That's exactly right. So again, what we have can now be such a large plural idea of what it is. Again, I come back to the first part of what I said. The number one thing human beings want is autonomy. And until you can answer that question yourself, that problem will be front and center for all of you. Because the other thing that I always go with is the other thing that human beings can't do very well is equate time. Like future is realistically a foreign concept, right? It is something we know it exists. We know that the future is coming, but when is that?
And if we've talked about this a lot on the podcast before, Steph, this autonomy piece that Evan's talking about, for us, it's good life. So autonomy or defining what your good life is, and then security and freedom of choice.
So on that, I refine that as abundance, right? So exactly.
Yeah.
The way to look at that is that you're asking what is value to you and the autonomy of having financial freedom. And therefore, the good life that you can have is understanding, A, you've got enough, and B, looking at it in the reverse, which is get away from the question Steph asked about scarcity and get towards the abundance. Because once you can start seeing that you actually have a lot, your optimism and your ability to deal with where you're at is so much higher. And you can see that in the numbers too. I mean, if you look at those people that actually go, I know that I have not just my bank account, not just my, portfolio that you might be having with Tribeca or whatever it happens to be, when you look at the whole, the abundance proliferates, and with abundance becomes more abundance.
And I will say, I'm very careful when I say this, Evan, for our listeners, but very much a choice, scarcity or abundance, but depending on where people are in their life. But if they can train their brain, but very much a choice.
Yeah.
I think that by virtue of the fact that we're living in Australia, you can say that we're amongst the luckiest people in the world, and that we there is abundance by just being lucky enough to be here at this time in this world. And so, yes, I do think on some level it is actually a choice, a mindset choice. I'm going to take a couple of steps back though, because I can feel this conversation.
We just went at a rapid rate.
I know, I love it though. Like I love the vibing. I can go just have a coffee and I'll come back in another 30 minutes.
No, Steph, we don't. No.
But I do want to just take a stop and ask the basic question: what is behavioural finance for people who might not have heard that term? Can you put it into simple?
We sort of glossed over it.
We have a little bit, so we'll go back, half a step.
Yeah.
How would you explain what that term means?
So behavioural finance is basically the study of our behaviour around economics and finance. So it is, again, as I said to you, with my semi-answers in half of that waxing lyrical that Ryan and I just had, which is all economics, all finance is just, when you look at the numbers, it's evaluating our behaviour. Why are we spending on, X, Y, Z? Why is this so attractive to this person but not to that person? Why do we at the moment have this incredible fascination with the way that property is working? Why do we get caught up with things like cryptocurrency and the whole concept of what is realistically, I would argue, it's the greater fool theory, right? So it's the attraction of this idea of this shiny prizes. Again, it's today, right? It's the here, it's the now, it's the fast, it's the speed. And
greater fool theory. Can you go there for 30 seconds?
So the greater fool theory.
I'll be honest, first time I'm hearing it.
Okay, cool. Yeah. So my question for both of you is, what is cryptocurrency? Or what is a playing card market? What is a whiskey distilled sort of history market? What is that?
That's speculating, I'd sort of say.
But so it's the value that you think that you assign to it.
Yeah.
Like, what is it? Well, only you can assign the value to that. Cryptocurrency is probably the great example of that, is that realistically it's a ledger, it's ones and zeros, and it's supposedly a value given to a, inverted commas, uncrackable movement of trade. Because it's not a currency, right? People argue it is, but you can't transact in it readily. It's not a flat rate. It has hyper and hypoinflation into it because it can rapidly move 20%, or like we've just seen since October, it's now halved in value. So you can't transact in it constantly. So the greater fool theory is the idea that basically I am buying this today for the idea that, Steph, tomorrow you think it's going to be worth more and I can sell it to you. It's got nothing else behind it, but the theory is that if I buy it today, somebody else will pay more for it. Now, you can apply that to a lot of things.
Yeah.
Right? So crypto is just the one I've picked out. But there is, that is, again, the whole concept of when we go past behavioural finance tries to define that. Why does human behaviour jump into something like that? So again, go back to 2021 and what happened with GameStop. For those of you that don't know what happened with GameStop theory, was, again, that goes into exactly what you just asked me before, Steph, which is it is a attention bias. It's confirmation bias. It's attribution biases, right? All of them just go shunk and weld into that, right? Steph's making a lot of money, and so is Ryan. They must be right. They know what they're talking about. I'm going to do it too. And nothing to do with any of the fundamentals behind it, any of the full rational decision-making behind GameStop. I mean, this is a run-of-the-mill, pretty average business in the States that even its own manager was just going,
This was one of my favourite cases because this was the one where they were going to get carved up by private equity GameStop, weren't they? And then then a bunch of internet heroes came in and were like, not on my watch.
Correct.
And then they all bought in and the stocks went through the roof and that's
it, right? So
they ruined they broke.
So what's the market?
Yeah, it wasn't. It was a joke that got so much momentum.
It was a joke at the same time, but at the same time, you're right to point out that there was a Reddit army that actually could interfere with market pricing.
Yeah.
Because they had the ability to use, I mean, this is also about the time that things like Robinhood came about and Robinhood were offering leverage. And this is, a complete anecdotal story with regards to how it is, but it's the best way to explain behavioral finance because it is that attraction. Like you were watching people make not just, thousands of dollars or tens of thousands of dollars. You're talking hundreds of thousands and millions. Leverage, confirmation bias, attention bias, choose your pick, mass media, expiration ideas, and you were being told by so-called experts that were on, chat sites and, big shorts sort of, attention sort of scenarios. This is that.
Yeah.
But you forget that like any market, particularly in a company like GameStop, is that it's still just a depth screen. Again, that's why I asked the question, what's the value of something? As soon as somebody isn't willing to buy from you, well, and you're selling, you've just got to chase the price down.
Yeah.
And that's, the risk. And then, look, people unfortunately committed suicide. Let's also be honest about it. It was horrid.
Yeah.
And that is where behavioural finance can get really bad because, again, you can't see out of it. Your scarcity mindset kicks in. I've lost all this money, the capital, and away you go.
Yeah.
So it's all of that.
I mean, can you ever, this is probably a big question, but is there such a thing as a rational decision?
No.
Thank you.
It's not a big question.
We're going to wrap it up. Yeah, because because when you're making any kind of big financial decision, rational or irrational is something that you can ascribe to a decision some point in the future.
But what is rational?
Well, I would say
because
I would say that it would have been an extremely rational decision to absolutely bankrupt yourself buying a property 6-7 years ago in Sydney or whatever because the value's doubled. You could say that that was a good decision because you knew property prices were going to go up. But if they'd gone the other way, then you would have bankrupted yourself. So you can kind of see.
But that's not rational.
Well,
it might have worked out for you, but doesn't mean the decision.
You're a savant though if you get it right, and if you're not, then you're like.
So that's the time issue, right? So future, right?
Yeah.
None of us can tell the future.
Yes.
Right. We can all sit here and study, as much as we want. It's why these ones.
Yeah.
Sit there and go, past performance is not a reliable indicator of future performance.
Yes.
It's a good indicator. We have seen many, many times that we repeat history over and over with regards to what we do and the behaviours that we have. But in terms of your question, why I was so definitive in no, rational, definitive rational answer is a robot.
Yeah.
Right? Because there is devoid of all human input in a purely rational, almost mathematical answer. Like, this is the numbers, it inputs into the algorithm, this is the outcome.
But but
and
then
even that can be wrong.
But then you have to ask what maths, what inputs.
Yeah, right. So the opposite to rational is not irrational. In most sort of physiological, psychological biases, but also in finance, right? Particularly in economics, because you have seen you go back to the 1850s when this first concept was pretty old, came out, the Homo economicus, which is the original concept, part being, every time I study it, I deliberately drop it out of my mind because it's completely pointless. It doesn't exist. It's a robot. But their argument was also that we are irrational because we bring in emotional decision-making, blah, blah. No. We are reasonable.
Yes.
Because we are making trade-offs every single day. So getting back to Ryan's point before about, what you talk about with your clients with choice, that choice is the reasonable decision, which is, do I put all of my money into the Sydney house market 5 years ago and absolutely just, hold onto my
Clean
chair
up,
knowing full well that it's going to work? But that means that my ability to live today with my family and the enjoyment that my family brings, I can't do. That's the trade-off. So this is why it's actually a reasonable decision that you are not following what's referred to as the rational decision, which is maximizing your returns at every point in the cycle. You just can't do that. And again, you've got to remind yourself that today, tomorrow, and beyond is what you're planning across. Diversifying your assets across time, that's what I get to sit here and talk to you about. It's very hard. Ryan gets to do that every day in his life with what he does at Tribeca. But that is what we're here to do, which is that if you're looking to maximize your returns, that's your choice, great. But your trade-off is that you obviously will find yourself very hard right now.
What I like about this is not condemning humans for the behaviour that has been ingrained in us since humans were walking around on two legs, right? Because I think there's this idea, this condemning of decisions as ridiculous because, of our human fallibility. But you can actually look at the decisions that we're being forced through evolution to sort of make. It would be, for example, I really like this movement at the moment, which is the FIRE movement, which is retire early, right? But what that...
So what is that?
Well, it's the financial independence, retire early.
I get that.
And the idea that...
That's a choice again. Sorry, I'm going to jump on
No, I'm getting there. I'm about to get to the same point you're about to make. Is that people are throwing all of their idea that they spend all of their youth just working and then you retire early and then have an amazing life. But people struggle to do that because what they're doing is compromising
now.
They're now, and that people find it hard to live off cornflakes and then put everything into stocks.
What do you do once you retire?
Right? Yes.
Right. So I try when I think the concept is great.
Yes.
Right? Financial independence, that part, the FI bit, absolutely.
Yeah.
But the RE bit, I have a problem with.
Yeah.
Because retire early, if you look at the theory, you need to get to $1.125 million, then live a fairly frugal life of 4% for the rest of it to make sure that it doesn't run out.
So you're spending, what, $45,000 a year?
A year, give or take, right? Now, you and I both know with the cost of living that's going on right now and the average cost of an individual, according to the ATO, at the moment for a comfortable position is about $51,000, and it's going up for a couple. I think it's about in the mid 70s and maybe touching 80 now, right?
So, right.
51 actually seems low to me.
That's not Sydney.
I was about to go. All right,
That's not Bondi.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's national, right?
Yeah,
so that's national.
So that'll be all sorts of.
So that includes rural areas. So the retire early. The other part that I get to ask in my world is, what are you going to do? Like, what exactly? I mean, again, don't define yourself by work. I get that.
Yeah.
But what are you going to do?
Yeah.
Like so the caveat that comes with it is that you therefore will get to a point, and we're starting to see it with those that are really passionate about it, is that they are having to, and are in the RE period, they're having to really work mentally to stay to the form because it is a very regimented way of living. Now, again, I think the concept of it's fantastic because it is about getting financially independent. But I would argue the second part should be financially independent, financial autonomy.
Yes.
So I call it FIFA, which is then
they're going to get you on a trade.
Careful.
Just nothing about football. But it's like at least then you can go and do what you want, knowing full well you've got a backing behind you. So a really good friend of mine who, I won't mention his name because he has kept it quiet, but he does run a FIRE podcast. Mm-hmm. He's out in rural Victoria. That's easy to find out who that is. He has actually blogged about the fact that he had that exact problem. And I remember talking to him leading into it. I was like, mate, you are going to crash into this problem. You are in your early 30s, mid-30s. You haven't had a child yet, but your wife is pregnant. That what you've been working for from when you were 20 to now is going to crash into your real world. And he wrote to me after, he said, yeah. I'm
Surprise.
like, yeah. But not as I said, I'm not surprised for you. I went, good.
Yeah.
Because now you've got other things you can do. And he started his own, tech business that he's always wanted to do. I said, because that was there.
Yeah.
That was there. Now, does he, wish that he spent a bit of time going overseas? Probably. Again, rational,
it's a choice. Yeah.
reasonable decision making. The reasonable decision was, I want to compromise my now for the future, which is fine. That's a good, reasonable decision.
Yeah.
But there will always be the hindsight.
So much, Steph, comes back to the end, today and tomorrow. So the reason, I love
Plural
the reason.
word.
Yeah.
Right? It's not an or.
Yeah, it's
right?
an and.
So
it's
the
always an and.
And I love it because I had this debate the other day. We talk about this and that. It's the most annoying statement ever. Why can't you have this and that? Right? And it's not about, having more material things.
Yeah.
It's about having a combination of both.
Something for today and for tomorrow.
Yeah.
Balance.
What are some, we've gone through a few of them, but what are some irrational financial decisions that you see people making often?
Okay, so we've gone through a few of them. Some of the most common irrational decisions that are almost prevalent constantly is to basically think that tomorrow will not come. Now, what I mean by that is that they are happy to live off credit. Now, that is not a downer on those of you that have to do that. Don't. But what I mean by that is credit, leverage of any description, borrowing of any description. I refer to it as a power tool. Using credit properly can get your house built really quickly. Using credit incorrectly, like a power tool, can cut your fingers off. So the irrational decision-making is the constantly I want, I need, rather than the idea that you are discretionary moving your choices, is using credit in an irrational way. So constantly rolling credit cards or constantly rolling what's referred to as bad debt, car, personal debt, anything that actually doesn't have capital growth behind it, etc. And it happens daily, right? I want that holiday. I'm going to go get a personal loan. That's probably one of the first things. Second one is that they'll invest a lump sum and then walk away constantly, right? And then expect it to have done something for you in return. It's not how it works because your habit hasn't been put in place, your behaviours haven't been put in place, and therefore it's just as bad as putting money into credit because you've just got this wad of capital sitting there. Yes, apparently it's giving you 6, 7, or 8% depending on what you've invested in, but you're paying no attention to it. It's not actually growing. Again, it's like anything. You need to actually cultivate it and away you go. The most common mistake that I see is that it's about, I'll do it tomorrow.
Yep.
Right. So
I don't know anyone who does that.
So, like the concept of it's not even about bad with money. It's about the fact that it's just something I can't do right now.
Yeah.
And I think that's the number one. It is my most irrational thing. My most common thing is that I don't have time. I don't understand. I'll do it tomorrow. Take your pick of all those cliches.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's what it is.
Yeah, but it's interesting if we take it away from money or finance, Evan. All three of us sitting around this desk have probably got something in some other field that we do that in.
Yeah. So again, the other way to look at it is loss aversion, right? So the way I can answer that irrational reaction is that there is a reason why Daniel Kahneman, who unfortunately passed away 2 years ago, rest his soul, won a Nobel Prize for finding loss aversion, which is the behaviour of that we are much more attuned to loss than we are to gain, is that if I don't make the decision, I can't lose. And what we also know from all of the material is that the best way to look at it is if you imagine right now, listening out there, watching this, you had money in your pocket. You knew a $50 note was there and you put your hand in there and you can't find it and it's gone. You will dwell on that up to a month. Flip that around, however. Let's say you just pick up those pair of pants, completely forgot about it, put your hand in, you found that $50, you can dwell on that up to just 4 hours. Right? And that's actually physiologically chosen with the dopamine release that it has from it. But the loss is there. Again, let's use what Ryan does in Ryan's world and what he and I did for planning. I know that your clients will call you more about their one loss-making position than the 10 positive positions they have. They will see the red before the green every day of the week. And that
it's the negative being Velcro
and
mindset, whereas the positive being Teflon.
Correct. And all of that goes back to scarcity.
Yeah.
Right. It also leads to bad behavior further, because once you start making loss, you'll actually start making even more and more poor decisions to try and get back to neutral.
Yeah, well, you see that at a casino.
Yeah. So again, using the study from Carter, the best way he explained it was, if I guarantee you $900 or $1,000, but a 10% chance I'll give you nothing, most people will take the 900 because it's guaranteed. Even though the rational maths is that the outcome is exactly the same, you should take the 1,000. But if you flip it around and say, I guarantee I'm going to take $900 off you, or I'll take $1,000 off you, but I'll give you a 10% chance you will lose nothing, everyone will do the second answer.
Isn't that so interesting?
Because that is the gambler's fallacy. That is the loss aversion fallacy. That if I can get back to zero, I haven't lost.
Yeah, right.
I will take the risk of $1,000 because it's only $100 more.
Yeah.
For the probability of getting nothing lost.
And with this loss aversion, Evan, do you think most people, this is in their their unconscious?
So but it's an ingrained bias. Yeah. So is it instinctive? Possibly. Yeah. It's hard to, instincts can be defined in so many different ways depending on who you ask, but it is very clearly human instinct because they have done this cross-sectional studies of across cultures. And it doesn't matter where you go in the world, that reaction is pretty much universal.
So what do you do? Does that mean that we just have to be alive to the fact that the loss aversion is there, and or do we? Is there a way of gaming our own brain so we're not so upset about it? Like, what do we actually? Now we know about it. What do we do?
So good terms. Like in terms of gaming, like one of the most known ways to get away from it is to automate your finances. Right. So if you can actually go, I'm going to step back from the decision making. I'm going to step back from the action because I haven't built the habit. I haven't got it into my ingrained. I'm going to put an automatic drawdown in my bank account to put 100, 200, 1,000, whatever it happens to be that you can afford into some form of actual wealth growing fund. Then you can get away from that issue. So
we have an excellent episode on cash flow as well, which I recommend listening back to because that talks about this automation process.
And I love that you asked that question, and something that I've been dying to ask you, Evan, and it's why don't we do a far better job of teaching money in primary and secondary school?
Oh, okay.
Because, this is almost soapbox, right? But education is empowerment, right? So fortunate, we're here in Melbourne. My stepdaughter goes to a very good private. They still don't teach it.
No.
With education is empowerment.
But it's, correct. But it's worse than that, right? So it's the value that the education system puts on it.
Yeah.
Right. So back in our era, the maths that we're discussing right now, finance, understanding your tax, understanding your personal income, looking through how, to build a business or to build a share portfolio or to, get into property. Well, that was it used to be called a special name and it had a derogatory term to it almost attached to it, which was business maths. Right? Do you remember it was called business maths?
Yeah.
It wasn't maths 1 or maths 2 or, higher, if you did I did the international bracket laureate, so it was called, higher maths or just standard maths. Mm-hmm. Business maths was the maths you did over here. So it wasn't sitting there doing algebra or it wasn't sitting there doing trigonometry or whatever you want to, calculus, blah, blah, blah. It was business maths, despite the fact that is the maths that you'll do until you die. Right?
So true.
So it's still seen that way.
Yeah.
And it's still not taught. I mean, it's when you walk out of school at 18 years old, you are expected to do your tax. You are expected to understand that you have income and you have outgoings. Can you actually look at your own personal balance sheet or your own personal profit or loss?
And you have no concept of your relationship with money.
Correct. And understanding, basically, if I do spend $100, $200, $300, $400 or $1,000 on a night out, what that means. How much money do I have to earn after tax to get that back? Right, so
after tax spending.
It's the great frustration. I mean, it's
so obvious,
but it's
so
worse
obvious.
than that, right? So if you go and talk to a politician about that, they have got zero interest. And is it an Australian-centric thing? Partly, but we do know it happens around, particularly the Western world, and particularly masculine Western world, like the individual nuclear family concept. It's different in collective cultures. Collective cultures work really, really well with family finances and teach their kids, cousins, greater cousins. So the best way to look at it, Asian cultures are fascinating because they pool their money and they work as a family and they teach the family from the day they're born that this is the family's wealth and we need to grow the family. We need to grow the community. So if an individual goes and does an investment, it's from the family. So if
shared meaning, shared responsibility, shared accountability.
But it also gets back to what we've been discussing around, the concept of loss and how they take it. If that investment was to lose, the impact is actually less because the collective versus that individual loss is, statistically, percentage-wise, smaller. Now, they learn from it. Yes, there is, disgrace that comes from hurting the family, but the recovery is faster.
Yeah.
Flip that on the other side, right? The nuclear family, that kind of investment and that kind of loss can ruin a whole family. No taught, no understanding, make the investment risk. The question that Steph's been asked before about irrational decision-making, the spiral effect is huge. So don't get me, I'm with you. We are starting to see it online, but again, in terms of actual formal education,
I think the fact that there's a market for it online, that we see all these,
but that's a problem too.
Yeah, it's a problem. It absolutely is a problem. But it shows that people are, who are you? What do you know about it? And there's as many grifters as there are people with good intentions.
Yeah.
But it shows that people are interested in this stuff. They want to have a little bit more control.
Which is the beautiful thing of change. So we're going into demographics here. This is my other love. That is the beauty at the moment of Gen Zers.
Yeah.
Right, so Gen Zers, I know they will get really angry when I say this, but they're the first generation that we've seen since the boomers actually experience genuine hardship and genuine loss. Right, so the boomers went through, everybody rages against them. Boomers have had time. We've been talking about time all the way through this podcast. They've had time to accumulate wealth, right? The last boomers from 1964, right? So that's a long time to accumulate wealth. But they also went through the recession in the 60s, stagflation in the 70s, 3 recessions in the 80s, and the one we had to have in the 90s. Right between peak period of earnings between the ages of 25 and 45, peak earning period, peak wealth creation, peak kid period. Right? So all of that happened to them, which is why they're quite conservative and they are all about keeping. It's why property is so attractive to them because they can control it. Millennials and basically pretty much all of Gen Xers are a different league again. They are lethal in terms of how they think. They are go dog, eat dog, go hard, and apologies to all you Gen Xers out there, but honestly ask yourself.
You don't need to apologise to me. That's fine.
But you are. Millennials are even more interesting in the fact that they're aloof to it, right? They don't realise how good they've had it until COVID came. And COVID changed that whole thing. And so the cost of living crisis now, the biggest whingers is my generation, which is a millennial generation, because they haven't ever experienced hardship. They had 29 years of uninterrupted growth. Gen Zers, on the other hand, they are becoming and showing signs like boomers in a different reaction in the fact that they have now seen that loss is actually very likely, right? So they have seen COVID and now they're going through cost of living and they're seeing higher interest rates and they're seeing all these other things that their older brothers and sisters and cousins, millennials, never experienced. Why is it to them? So their thinking and their way they're reacting is now more like what we start to see at the early part of the boomers, which is that the silent generation going to war, etc., don't want to do that anymore for good reason.
Yep.
But also the way that the society was bringing up silent generation and the generation before them, very structured, very hierarchical. No, we don't want that. So the interruption for me at the moment with Gen Zers is that they are actually starting to say that working harder doesn't work for me because if I work harder, I'm just giving it to the government.
Yeah.
And not only am I giving it to the government, I can't get ahead because I can't buy it at the property market. It's too expensive. This isn't working for me. And so that's the behavioural finance part that I'm finding fascinating right now.
It is such an interesting time, yeah.
Are fascinating because they are definitely becoming the new boomers.
Would they be potentially better at the end?
So they could be, but again, it's what they're investing in.
Yeah.
So like we saw with the boomers, they are experimenting, and that is the right term. They are the ones that are more likely to get into digital because they are the digital generation. That's good, but they're also getting swept away with assets that are irrational in terms of their numbers, but they're getting better at it and they're becoming more organised. The other thing is we've asked all the way through this podcast, how do you talk about money? They are the most open with money I've ever seen. They will put online to the cent what they're worth.
Yeah.
That's the social media generation, right? Who are actually like they're
which crashes into the tall poppy problem.
Yeah, but they're
Which
told
That's good. Yeah.
to share everything online and nothing is sort of personal, and it means that there is like this big movement and sharing of information.
So they're breaking that barrier down, but there's other things they're crashing into.
But yeah, well, I mean, I think it's really interesting that it is a bit of a problem for Australia, I think, that doing a job 9 to 5, Monday to Friday.
Doesn't exist.
It's harder to get it. It doesn't exist. And you're not going to build.
Worse than that. They actually sit there and go, no. If my Gen X boss rings me up and goes, can you work on the weekend? They're like, no. I'm not doing that. Why do I make my value your value?
Yeah, and
that's what they're saying.
And it's throwing the whole workforce. I think that millennials are also, as a millennial, I think that this is something
starting to stand up with it. But
yeah, because it realizes that there's been a realization that the status quo is kind of a little bit changed now, that the idea that you do the same job for 20 years and you have pay increases that are commensurate with the pay increases and cost of living hasn't really worked that way. It doesn't exist, right? Yeah, and so again, at Tribeca, you guys always talk about you don't have to opt into what everyone else is doing.
We've got a 4-day work week on purpose.
Yeah, exactly. And you guys also believe that you don't have to be doing the job that you hate. Instead, it's like, well, how do you want to actually live?
Exactly
and
right.
maybe it's just, well, I don't want
far more about value than time.
Yes,
how we adding
exactly.
value as opposed to just time.
Yeah. I think we're in for a very interesting few years.
Oh, yeah. I mean, but I would argue that the interesting few years have been going on for a while.
Oh, yes.
I mean, Australia has now crashed into the biggest problem that it is facing. We're sort of going a little bit off topic, but we need to talk about it, which is we're talking here also now about effort, right? So Ryan's beautifully highlighted with, adding the value of time to his work stuff by saying it's a 4-day week and what have you, about effort. So this is where you get existential and you get really large to bring down to the individual. If you at the moment see that effort is going to be eroded by the system, you're not going to do it. So the Gen Z is the great example, right? As I said, trying to save for a house, Sydney-sider, is an incredibly hard thing. I'd even argue if you're watching this in Queensland at the moment, I mean, Brisbane now has gone through 7 figures for the median house price.
Yeah.
So what do you do, right? So this is where at the moment there is going to be a lot of discussion about wealth and how wealth is divided and how it is, let's be honest, taxed. The number one and forgotten thing about all governments about taxation is that it is actually a behaviour changer, right? So taxation is actually the best way to change behaviour. So you have to pay tax to live in any country. That's fair and reasonable. But you also will go, I've worked hard for this. I want to keep what I have, scarcity. So let's look at the tobacco excise. That is not a tax policy. That's a health policy. It's designed to make smoking an expensive problem that either slows you down and stops you. Therefore, it takes pressure off the health system. That's what it is. But that applies to everything, right? So if you are taxing capital gains on something like 50% after, half of what it is after 1 year, that behaviour obviously immediately says, I'm going to invest for a longer period of time. The other way is superannuation. If you're working your butt off and you're going to get 37 or 45 cents in the dollar taken away from you, but it's 15 cents in superannuation, well, clearly you're going to put as much into it as you can. But that creates that wealth divide issue. It's about trying to basically safeguard retirement savings. The catch is that it also means that if you're at the lower end of the scale, you can't put anywhere near into that. Right. So what's about to happen with the government next year taking the lowest income from 16 this year down to 15, and then next year it goes to 14%? There is zero incentive to put money into superannuation because your own personal income tax is 14%. Your superannuation tax is 15%. Why would you do it? So this is the catch that's crashing into us right now, is that the reason we have low productivity, the reason we have people making family trusts, the reason why negative gearing is so attractive is that this is 20, 30 years of decision-making, choices that we have made as a nation that the individual is reacting to. And they have reacted to rationally over that period of time to move into it. This is what I get to sit here and watch and why I'm really strong at the moment, that when we hear the tax debate, you cannot do it individually and piecemeal. It is the whole thing. If you're going to change CGT, which I would argue actually what they're talking about is probably a good thing, then you immediately need to counter that with changes to income. Because if people that are working their butt off cannot get ahead and cannot get the lifestyle that their parents and their grandparents had, something's wrong. And if their parents are benefiting so easily because the behaviour they can do is to put more into a tax vehicle that's so cheap, superannuation, then that also has to be looked at. I mean, 6% of last year's total revenue from the government was superannuation. 62% was from personal income tax.
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah.
Of the total government revenue comes from everyone working.
Yeah.
That is too high. And again, our world, diversification.
Yeah.
If you're an asset manager, which the treasurer is, him looking at that going, I have one asset that's earning 62% of my total revenue.
Yeah.
That's a problem.
Especially because I know more and more people who are just opting out. They're like, well, I'm going to...
That's interesting. In what way?
In the way that they're saying, well, I'm not going to work 5 days a week and live in a very expensive city. It actually makes more sense for me to move somewhere regional, work 2 days a week and be...
Choice.
Yeah, and it's like, well, because once I've paid for accommodation, bills, transport in a very expensive city, plus wages aren't that good, I'd actually be better off working 2 days a week, pulling beers at a pub in a regional area. And then essentially my ability to save remains the same. Which again I think is totally fine for the individual.
I love this.
I completely agree.
It's an informed choice.
Oh,
I think sometimes if
when
you're on the
numbers,
highest marginal tax bracket, if people worked out what they actually pay in tax, GST, alcohol, smoke, depends what your vice is, right?
Yeah.
Maybe gambling as well. You're paying 65, 70 cents in the
So the other way people argue that is that if you look at your wage as a 5 day week, right, you're paying 3 days out of the 5 days to the government.
Yes.
Right, that's why you hear this terminology where basically, 60% of what you earn goes to the government.
Yeah.
So that means you're really giving 2 3/4 days.
Yeah, which is
you're working for the government.
Yeah.
You're not working for yourself, you're working for the government.
So people have just said, well, it actually my ability to save, my ability to sort of manage my money is the same if I move further out, and that would, again, which is great for the individual, great that people are making those decisions, but it does mean that they're opting out of a system that gets roads built.
So that's exactly right. So that's the problem.
That's the risk at 62%, right? Because then you've got
because
a generation.
Because everyone's like, I'm getting way too taxed, and I can just have an easier life, and actually there is no material gain from me working harder.
Yeah,
is really scary.
And then you've got the flip side that we just talked about with the demographics. Boomers still make up 1 in 5 of us. It's a little bit less, but it's still 1 in 5 of us. But they, over the next 10 years, will be gone.
Yeah.
So where does the taxation coming from them from working come from?
Yeah.
That's why you keep hearing this generational problem pushing down the numbers. Why I would argue actually migration is needed, because migration is replacing the boomers for the income that comes with them, right? So this whole concept about we need to crack down on migration because it's going to fix housing, that is a misnomer. That's a massive misnomer. We need the skill instead. Yes, we're probably getting the skills wrong, but this is, again, the behaviour of all of this and the way that a society works and the way that we think about what we're doing here with our own personal money versus all the way up to where we're talking about with government and the actual sovereign state is that we continue to allow what happened 30 years ago to be the answer.
So very conscious, I'm putting you on the spot here. But if you were Jim Chalmers, what are you doing?
Yeah, go on, run the country for us.
Or just the treasurer.
Surprisingly, this question's been coming more and more often. I think the first thing that I would have to do if I was Jim Chalmers is actually admit that we cannot keep going the way we are going.
And that's a big step for you.
That's a big step for either side, right? Yeah. So not only that, it's not for him, it's actually for Albo.
Yeah.
Right? So Anthony Albanese is a very conservative prime minister. I can say that quite, that's not being partisan or anything like that. That's pretty true. And he's open about that. He's like, no, I need to take it to the people before I act, which is fine. But we don't have time to wait for him to do that. So if I was Jim Chalmers, I would be going back 2010. The Henry Review was done. The taxation changed
16 years ago.
16 years ago.
Yeah.
The Henry Review was done. He laid it all there. So you and I work in an industry where we go, the best time to invest was yesterday.
Have you heard that before, Steph?
I haven't.
The next best time is today.
Yeah.
It's not tomorrow.
Yeah.
So at what point, and this gets down to, again, we can go into theory, but we're talking about what's realistically sunk cost, right? So the value of what we're missing out on, can we actually, cauterize that and cleave it off? Can we actually admit that we've got a problem, we need to change? And if we're not going to change, we're going to go down to a path where sooner or later it's going to crush into us. And we're realistically getting there. We've just discussed all that. So if I was Jim, I would be standing up there going, we have been voted in as the government. We have a majority. The situation has changed. The situation is very clear in the numbers. It's very clear in the electorate. And it's very clear in what you and I have just been discussing, even at the granular level. We have to change. And therefore, this is what we need to change with an independent review that was done 16 years ago, going, this is the basis of why we're doing it.
Evan, I feel like we need another 45 minutes. That was. I'm not ready to stop this conversation, but I know you've got somewhere to be. Thank you so much for your time.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you for having me
It's
on.
been
It's
really
been
great.
a lot of fun. I love these discussions because, again, apologies I went completely off.
No.
We did have a whole heap of questions here.
We went straight
And
in.
I killed it.
We're gonna have to get you back so I can ask some of these next time. But if you want to hear more of Evan, do check out his podcast Exchanges with Evan Lucas, or read his book Mind Over Money. He might talk about some of the stuff we were going to get to in this episode, but didn't quite get to.
Next time.
If you feel like you got some value out of this conversation, do make sure you follow Money and a Good Life wherever you're listening now, so you don't miss an episode. We'll see you next time. Advice given in this podcast is general in nature and is not intended to influence decisions about investing or financial products. Our listeners should always seek their own professional advice that considers their own personal circumstances before making any financial decisions.